Hello and welcome to Focus On. Today we are focusing on Gay Pride 2020 or Pride 2020. And my name is Catherine Hecht. I'm your host and the executive director of the Alexander Valley Film Society. Welcome to my home in Cloverdale, California. And I can't wait to introduce you to the incredible guests we have today. It's just been a really remarkable turn of events to have a return guest with us, a return guest and her wife, both filmmakers, and a new friend that was introduced to us through my colleague, Tess McAfee. Brian Benson is with us today. And as luck would have it, it just so happens that the incomparable Dolores Huerta is also going to be in the studio. So Bret Parker and her wife, Petey Barma, Brian Benson, and Dolores Huerta, all here to celebrate Pride with us in little old Cloverdale, coming live to you across all these fabulous channels. And please take a minute while we're running today. Type in your name, let us know that you're watching and where you're from, and we'll throw the names up on the screen. You're more than welcome to ask questions of our guests, and we'll get to them as soon as we have time, if we have time. Today's focus, we're focusing on Pride 2020. We hope you've had a chance to view the PRIDE MINIFEST with Eat the Rainbow, the short from Brian, and Through the Windows from Bret and Petey. And if you haven't had a chance to do that, we just extended the viewing window as well so that you can purchase your tickets after you've seen the panel today. Purchase your tickets from our website, avfilmsociety.org, and then you will have a 4-day viewing window. So you'll be able to watch it for 4 days. Even after you click play, you have 4 days to watch it. You can watch it over and over again, and then come back and rewatch this panel to get some of that inside good stuff that you get from the filmmakers with something like this. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome our guest to the studio, and it is my great pride and privilege to welcome all 4 of these lovelies. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the studio. Oh, let me unmute everybody. Oh, hi.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for inviting us.
So amazing to have you all here. Bret, welcome back to the show. Did you ever think you'd be a return guest?
No, it's such an honor.
You were here on Mother's Day and now Father's Day.
I was thinking about that this morning. I was like, oh, what a coincidence. We represent all parents.
Yes, exactly. And happy Father's Day, by the way, to all the dads out there. I certainly miss my dad. He's been gone quite a while, but anybody who plays that parental role in a child's life, happy day to you. So Dolores, Brian, Petey, welcome to the show. Petey, you and Bret did Through the Windows. And was this your first feature film?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Bret works in the industry, but it's definitely our first feature film.
Yeah.
And was it your personal first feature film, or just the first feature film together?
Both.
Yeah, I had directed like a little animated short. I taught for some time at California College of the Arts, and we did a project with the Marine Mammal Center on climate change, actually. So I got to direct that. But this was the first feature we'd done, and the first film that we had directed together.
And how did that go for the household?
Most of the time it went really well.
Yeah.
We definitely have 2 separate roles that we like to play, so they didn't seem to overlap too much. Occasional disagreements with some direction, but I pretty much let her.
Oh no, that's not
Well, and still smiling, I'd say that's an accomplishment.
Yeah.
No, it was great. It was a great experience. Like I said, we both definitely like to play different roles in the project, so the fact that they don't overlap too much was helpful.
That's great. And right before we got on the horn for this, we were just talking about, Petey, you are an educator, yes?
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm 30 plus years in education, and was started out as a high school lit teacher. So storytelling and oral storytelling is something I really love. I think teaching is just like an endless oral storytelling. So it seemed natural to jump into something like this with Bret. But so I've moved here. I've been in the Bay Area about 12 years now. So working here in public schools.
And you teach at an immersion school, correct?
I do a little K-8. I'm actually a dean now, but I was always in lit and reading specialist. So
do you want to do a shout out to the kids?
I hope they see. I can't believe I should have told them. Hey, Paul Revere.
That's awesome. Well, and we were just talking right before we got on. Dolores's grandchildren go to an immersion school in Bakersfield, right, Dolores?
Yeah, that's right. And I used to be a teacher way back when too. I taught elementary school for a couple of years.
Wow.
Cannot wait. Tell people.
That's so cool. My mother was a special education teacher for 30 years.
Wow.
So I kind of feel like teachers should get like $1 million raise per day. It's totally selfless work. Thank you for that. And so toggling over quickly to Brian and his starlet here that he's brought with him today. Brian, tell us where does Eat the Rainbow fit in for you trajectory wise on your projects?
Well, I have a drag character named Cousin Wonderlet, and this is the 10th film in a series of films with her. This is for sure the most political, and it's a musical, and it's the biggest, effort that I've done with this character.
But and did you wrote, directed, and produced it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a producer help me, but I was also a producer on the project. I don't think I'm credited as a producer.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah. I was sharing credits.
Right. But you have quite a bit of production in your resume, right? I mean, you've been doing a lot of production and AD work. Is that correct?
I've produced and AD'd about 30 movies, including a film called Sorry to Bother You, and a film called Diary of a Teenage Girl, a movie called Howl. But yeah, that's my day job.
Your day job. Yeah.
And I do a lot of commercials as well.
And AD, for anybody who's watching it, doesn't assistant director, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so Dolores, I would hope that anybody watching us right now would know who you are, but it just so happens that this was a special moment for you. This was your film debut.
Yes, it was. Well, I've been in a lot of documentaries, but never in a narrative where I had to act. And of course, Brian was a great director. But I think you forgot to say that he's also acting in the film because
yes, you're right.
His alter ego is Wonderlet.
Mm-hmm.
So Brian, he acted, directed, and produced, and I guess wrote the script. What else, Brian?
Ran the lights and hung the...
Yeah.
No, I didn't do that stuff. I had a big, generous crew that worked on this. This was probably one of the best film experiences I've had. We had such a great crew. It was a very, very calm, sort of creative set.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Brian, did you do the music and lyrics as well, or someone else did?
I mean, I have no musical talent, and you can tell from my singing. But I wrote the lyrics, and I worked with Marco D'Ambrosio, who is our composer, and H.P. Mendoza, who plays Biani in the movie, who is also a very talented filmmaker and composer. And the three of us wrote the music together. It was a pretty satisfying experience, and it came together very quickly. The three of us sort of working on the songs together. And originally, I was not going to sing my own part. I was making everyone else sing, but I wasn't going to sing myself. In the tradition of drag, I was going to lip sync. And we had this beautiful this guy who had this beautiful voice. He has a drag character that he sings under. It's Carletta Suke, and he's got a wonderful voice. But everyone was like, "Yeah, it doesn't really fit the character." so I was like tricked into singing my own.
It worked. It was glad you did.
Yeah.
It's appropriate for the role.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the first thing that I wanted to talk about is the origination of the story, why these stories needed to be told and why they needed to be told by you. Bret and Petey, can you tell us a little bit about how Through the Windows came to be?
Yeah, it's like we mentioned earlier, it's our neighborhood pub after moving here, and they have teacher hours, meaning they're open when teachers get off work.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Just can't find many. But I started going there and realizing pretty quickly it was a special place, not knowing until I moved here the historic value of the location and the bar and the story behind it and the women that owned it. But I think what really spurred us is a couple of our very first friends or acquaintances that we got to know there passed away shortly after we became regulars, so to speak, lack of a better term. And it was really hit us both in a way that it seemed like their stories were instantly lost. Coming from a generation, maybe they weren't connected to their families anymore due to their identity as queer members of the community. And so it seemed like with that passing, that was that. And when we lost a couple in a row, it seemed poignant enough to start paying attention to those stories. So that's why it's not just the story of the bar, but for the people. And they've been going there since 1972. They haven't left. So,
and for us, it felt like the part of the unique part of that was that I don't know a bar that I would say I would go to for 30 plus years. And just then the role that bar has played within the queer community in the Castro has been significant. And it's changed the role it's played throughout time. And so we both wanted to sort of capture these stories that are disappearing with the passing of these people, as well as the story of the bar, and weave those together.
Well, I think you accomplished that. I really do. What about you, Brian? Where did Eat the Rainbow come from?
I mean, the character and the films have a bit of a history. I was my friend Joshua Grinnell, whose alter ego is Peaches Christ, wrote and directed a movie called All About Evil, and I was lucky enough to get hired as the producer and the first assistant director on the film. And Joshua and I became friends, and I showed him I had gone to see my ex-boyfriend in Portland, and I had I put on this wig and these teeth and these glasses, and it was kind of transformative in a way. And I just had a couple pictures, and I showed it to Joshua, and he's like, "I'm putting her on stage." And so it actually got into, as a joke, it was sort of made it into our contract. It's like, if you produce my movie, I'll make your character locally famous. And so she put me on stage. And I started doing performances, and I was super insecure about performing. So I would make a movie where I have confidence in making a movie. Plus, you can control it, right? Like, you control live, you can't control. Live terrifies me. And I would make these little films that were like the first and second act, and then the third act was like a performance, like a number or whatever. But I was doing it in clubs, and it was very competitive. It was loud, and it was, a lot of people were drunk, and it was, it was this, queer, scene. And so I decided I would make it really shocking and ridiculous. And so my character, these films were offensive and and she had a bad mother, and bullies got away, and she never sort of got anything. Well, I think in the last few years, this film, I didn't, because of our current sort of climate, I didn't want to make a movie where bullies got away with it. What got away with anything. And so, and I was obviously, there's obviously a references to what's happening now. I mean, I have people wearing MAGA hats. So, I just thought it's just the world is so absurd, the stuff that we're living through. And I just wanted to make an absurd film that sort of pointed at the absurdity of it all. It's a fable. It's very, it's very thin. I mean, it's like I try and touch on a lot of things, but in a sort of it's kind of an adult fable, very, very, simplistic points of view, but in a way to make fun of how, unnecessarily complicated and ridiculous things are. It's pretty simple. It's just a matter of inclusion.
It's so interesting to me that a lot of our storytelling, our storytelling today, and it's going to be fascinating to see what it's like in a year, 18 months time, from both a public health perspective and the civil and social unrest, and the uprising of people and young people. By the way, did you all hear about the TikTokers who pranked the Trump rally? The TikTokers, bought the tickets or, claimed the tickets and then didn't show up. And that was their act of protest. And for one thing, I've said it here before, the Film Society doesn't have a political stance because the Film Society is an organization. But we have certainly talked about the difference between not conservative and liberal, but a hateful rhetoric, hateful acts, a hateful regime, and these are things that bring me back to my point. And I'm sorry for even taking up this much time to say it. But the pageantry being this expression of self-affirming pride, which is apropos, but also in defiance of. And there's something about that I also got from Eat the Rainbow, and even in the dialogue from some of the folks who were interviewed and through the windows, like that, the place that we take ourselves to protect ourselves, which is also the place of self-affirmation. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does. And I just want to throw in there that when you see the rainbow and it brings so many issues together and brings so many issues to light, and the characters are so strong in terms of their racism, and that sort of is mirroring what is happening in today's world. I know here in Bakersfield, Bakersfield is kind of like Alabama, down here in Kern County, and the protesters, they have met with people like the people in Eat the Rainbow that are yelling at them. And one woman even, and she was a school teacher, she even said to a little girl and her mother, "I would love to kill you." I mean, those are the words she used. One of the protesters, an African American, was run down by a car. And to this moment, he has not been arrested. And he had all of these Nazi tattoos on him as a white nationalist guy. And the police to this moment have not arrested him. But so when you see Eat the Rainbow, and the acting is so powerful in Eat the Rainbow that, it really mirrors these counter protesters that are yelling at the young people who are marching and doing all these things. So, and the thing I love about Eat the Rainbow, it does that in such a delightful way. So it takes us to the issues, but then you come out feeling really, really good after you see the film. I think it's fabulous.
I agree, Dolores. I think there's something about that. There are some people not exposed to queer cinema who might say, why does it have to be so colorful? Why does it have to be so flamboyant or so out there? And I think that that's part of what I'm trying to express is I think that by meeting the reality head on, there's no room for debate of what the experience is.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian, can you talk a little bit about that since you've walked this character through so many experiences?
Well, I think my character has always had a very good heart. She's just in a shitty world. And this film was the first film where I wanted it to be. The other films can be very dark and very messed up, and I wanted this to be very joyful, right? Like I didn't want to, in the face of kind of crappy circumstances, I wanted to just have this whole neighborhood turn around and show that there's a hopeful sort of, there are hopeful possibilities. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question. So you don't remember what your question was. Sorry.
Keep going. No, that's fine.
Yeah. So. Anyway, and honestly, after I just produced a film called Dolores about Dolores Huerta, and spent a lot of time with Dolores and her family. And I don't think you become friends with Dolores and not become an activist. I mean, so I feel like this was this is the first of the 10 films that had an activist spirit, and I'm shocked that Dolores agreed to be in it. But the role is appropriate. It's an appropriate role for her. It's her brand, right? She's talking about facing your challenges and fighting for your rights. Your place, fighting for your place. And so, she was, the wise person in the film. It made a lot of sense. And I'm so honored that she said yes.
Little teary-eyed. I think, yeah. I mean, Brian, you did answer the question. It's about being an activist and how art is active in that way. Bret and Petey, can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, pardon the pun, there's no clearer way to describe it than to actually open the windows and let us see into people's lives like this.
Yeah, I mean, it really was a big deal, I think. I don't think a lot of people, when it comes to, like you said, queer cinema or queer history, have it's not, just like so many of marginalized groups, it's not public knowledge necessarily. It's like a secret society, so to speak, knows about certain things. So sharing that with the world, that it was a really big deal to be seen and be willing to go there. And certainly they didn't think it would be, I guess the women thought it would be successful because they made that choice, who's referred to as the girls. They made the choice to clear the windows off, and a lot of people really didn't think that would work out in their best interest. So to everybody that sat there in those early days, for everybody that was willing to, have that very clear shield between them and the outside world that wasn't in favor. The neighborhood wasn't welcoming at that point quite yet. The world certainly wasn't welcoming. So they were, I don't even know if they always knew what activists they were. Mm-hmm. Until we talked about it, to be honest. And we were pretty good friends with all the gentlemen that were willing. And even to this day, I don't think a lot of the men knew that they've been being seen all along, and we're a little nervous about being in the film. And I'm like, but you've been on the side of this glass for 43 years. Everybody knows you're here. So there was still some apprehension based on their own experiences, to really put it out there and not realizing what tremendous activists they've been all along.
I think both of the films, and I haven't seen your film yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. But I think they talk, when you say Wonderland, there's a certain innocence about Wonderland. And you kind of see that in the young people that are marching in the protests today. even sometimes, they're risking their lives because they're out there protesting when we have this pandemic. But then the courage. And I think the courage that it takes to be an activist, the courage that it takes for people to come out. And I think both, I know that Wonderlet definitely, with that innocence, she has so much courage, and she shows that to the world. And I think, and that's what we need right now, is for people to have the courage to speak out and to defend people when they need defending.
Oh, gosh, I don't know if I'm going to get through this. It's so true, and I mean, this is what art can do. Art can tell the stories and make them accessible for people that don't have a background in queer cinema, or maybe don't even know that they have queer friends or queer family members.
Yeah, it was funny. I work with people of all ages, but there was a colleague of mine, and he's probably in his mid-20s, early to mid-20s, grew up in San Francisco, and he came to me and he said, I had no idea it was once illegal to be gay,
Right.
and that there were raids. He knew nothing, and because all he knew, because he's young enough, right? He grew up in an area where, you had the Castro, you could be out and free and open, but he didn't know that was his experience of gay culture. And I think it's been interesting because we have had some people within the gay community who have been like, oh, but we all know these stories. It's like, well, a small subset of people really know these stories. And even within the young generation of gay and straight, there's so many stories that are not being told and passed down. So it was eye-opening, even as we were making the film and even after, to hear that and to realize how much oral tradition is so important, and film as a part of that, to capture the history and the history forward.
Yeah, I was really floored watching the movie and learning that it was they took down the window coverings, but it was a no-touch bar.
Yeah. You want any trouble.
Yeah.
But it kind of, in a weird way, it gave it a personality that was unique, I think, in the gay bar scene at the time, and meaning it provided a different place and a different purpose. And so I think accidentally that decision that they made, because it's certainly not the rule right now, although it still has that vibe, that it has a certain a different purpose in gathering. So I think it wasn't intentional that they created that by making that decision. It was just to keep trouble at bay because of the windows. But I'm interestingly, I think it added to the atmosphere. In a positive way.
Yeah. Brian, what do you think? What is your take in terms of what we're experiencing right now? We're kind of in a lightning moment. I hope we're in a lightning moment that really cracks things open, right? How is this going to change what you do in the future, do you think?
It's so funny that you say that, because I am in the process of writing a feature film with my character. And I think over the last 3 months, and maybe over the last month even more, I've just been kind of reevaluating everything. Both in terms of like content, but also in terms of like the industry, in terms of the market. We're going to be in a new world now because of this pandemic, and I don't think the pandemic is going away for a while. So I think it's going to affect theater chains. I think it's going to affect distribution. I think it's going to affect, online is obviously going to be king or queen. And so I'm rethinking, all of it. I'm rethinking. It's like, if I'm going to make a feature film, I've got to consider what the market is. So I think everything feels to me like on hold, but then on the other hand, I feel like this urge to like create stuff. So,
well, and in the middle of this, by the way, talking about creating, Dolores, we celebrated your 90th birthday. What was that, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, May the 30th, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, so, and you were a huge part of that, Brian. I mean, I know it was a lot. There were a lot of really incredible people involved, but here we were somewhat immobilized, and yet the people who came out to celebrate Dolores and ask her to live for another 90 years, no pressure. Yeah, I mean, Dolores, what is your vision now for our creative lives and our creative selves?
Oh, well, I think there's going to be definitely a lot of content for creativity with everything that's going on right now. And even people going back into history, like we've heard about what happened there in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with the Greenwood District. And I think, and people, I think, are going to be anxious to learn. And so I think all of the histories of the LGBT movement, people are going to want to learn more about how it started, going back to the Stonewall protests in New York City. I think people are going to be hungry for knowledge right now, because I think there is a feeling with a lot of people in the country that we want to know. First, I didn't even know. I just found out yesterday from Gregory Nava, who's another great filmmaker, that there were 7,000 Mexicans lynched in Texas. 7,000. The figure I had heard was like 153. And, so I think people are going to start wanting to know more. And I think there's going to be a lot more material. And also because art, we know, is it's an education. Because through art, you're not only giving people information, but because of the emotional content that art has, you are really you're reaching people's hearts and you're reaching people's minds. And so I think it's just going to be an explosion of opportunities in the artistic world and film and art, everything, writing, everything. In fact, I think this morning they were talking about how there's a bookstore in San Francisco, which is the oldest African American bookstore, and now everybody is going to that bookstore to buy books, to talk about the Black experience. So I think that's a sign of what's going to be happening in the future, and I do think that we are going to make some lasting changes. Back in the '60s, because I'm 90 years old, and I was lucky enough to live through the '60s. And even through because I was born during the Depression, but we saw great changes that came out of the Depression. We saw great changes that came out of the '60s, and I think we're going to see incredible changes just because now through the social media platforms, information could be it can be shared so easily, and you can't hide anything. Nobody can hide anything.
Yeah.
So the truth is going to be coming out, and the truth is going to, as they say, the truth will make us free. It will liberate us.
Yeah.
Oh, from your lips to the universe's ears. Yes. Bret and Petey, what about you? I mean, I know I want to hear about what you're working on, and how is that being reshaped, if at all, by what's happening right now?
Well, we are working on an animated short, and it is actually taking a moment in Pete's life as a childhood. It's a story about gender identity and Little League Baseball, the courage of those who create change by just trying to be themselves. And the heroes, the superheroes who support them and allow that change to happen. And by doing so, change the world, whether the world is ready for that change or not. So it's interesting because it's actually this moment that happened to Pete in her life as a child. But it feels so relevant right now because it really is about creating change and the strength that it takes, and how important it is, I think, for all of us to remember to just be ourselves and hold on to our identity. And even if that doesn't fit in, it's so apropos with your film, Brian. Whoever you are, but and that by doing so, even if it's within a neighborhood block, you are creating change, and that change ripples out.
So true.
That's what we're working on.
Yeah.
I love it. And it's tied in. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up on a street that looked just like the street in your film.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a little cul-de-sac at the end.
Nice.
So a lot of baseball games happened there.
Yeah.
Aw. Aw. And what about, Brian, for you now? So we have this changing world that we're in the middle of. What kind of stuff are you dreaming about for your community, and whatever that community means to you in this moment? What kind of things do you want to see happen?
Well, I think it's important to hear stories of different experiences. I feel like there's a big fight for transgendered folks right now. Our president is being a dick about stuff. And I think we need to hear stories. I think we need to hear those stories. I sort of started writing a story about that. And honestly, I feel like as a white male, I want to tell stories that aren't mine. I mean, I actually asked Dolores before I wrote Eat the Rainbow if it's appropriate for me to tell a story about a person of color, right? Like a blue person. Is it appropriate, right? It's not my experience, and I felt like I was given permission to tell the story. So, but I think those stories need to be told by those communities.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. That's great. But Bret and Petey, what about you? Doesn't have to be the same kind of community, but what are you envisioning for your community right now?
Well, I mean, as an educator, it's hard not to try to envision change at every level. I mean, for me, that's between filmmaking and teaching. Those two things, like I said, the storytelling goes hand in hand. So I think for me, that would be the biggest area in my students. I'm really hopeful. I think we've underestimated this generation that has been quietly until now absorbing all this stuff, absorbing the good, the bad, and everything, and seemingly not taking too kindly to having the rug pulled out from underneath them, and have taken to the streets. And I'm really hoping that the young people that I have in my life that are too young for this moment right now, but that we can really change. For me right now, education is heavy on my mind, and can we really change the narrative? Even as a teacher, there's so many stories I feel really apologetic that I haven't shared, literature I could have shared, or history I could have shared as an educator. So for me, that's the biggest shift that needs to happen. Without education, we may not find ourselves in these spots quite so often.
Yeah.
So,
Dolores, what are you thinking?
I want to second that, because in all of my talks that I give, and I go around, talking it, well, before I'm doing it virtually at universities and community groups, but I do think that education is going to be our savior. And we just got to start teaching children and pre-kindergarten, number one, that we're one human race, that we're Homo sapiens. And I love to say that our human race began in Africa. Our human civilization began in Africa. And Africans traveled all over the planet, and that's us, so we're all Africans of different shades and colors. And that needs to be taught. And I like to say, do we want to say to the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists and the KKK. Get over it. You're Africans. Okay, enough already. Just stop it. And then teach, little boys that women, we're equal, except for our physical strength, you're intellectual equals, and that people have a right to marry and fall in love with who they want to, and women have a right to abortion, and we've got to save our planet, but we've got to start teaching this to little children. We shouldn't have to wait till they get to college to learn all this stuff. So, Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, during World War II, when they wanted to take money out of education, out of the libraries, he wouldn't let them. He said, education is the soul of the country. And our soul of the country, we need to save our soul from the devils out there. And the way we can save our souls is through education. And when we partner that education with film, and with music and with art, that makes it so much stronger. And again, after the Depression, what did FDR do? They spent so much money on hiring artists. I learned how to tap dance, in grammar school because they hired a dance teacher, and I learned how to play the violin in elementary school because this was all part of the effort that they did after the Depression to put people to work. And I think that's something that we have to really start fighting for. Then that we need to have artists, we need to have teachers and filmmakers be paid to do part of this massive educational work that we need to do to save the soul of our country. I didn't mean to make a speech, but it just went away. Sorry.
Good.
Sorry about that.
We're with you. I would add to that, Dolores, if I may, I would add that I also feel like I'm in a place where I need to be educated too. And I think that the education is for all of us. We definitely want to give it to our young people. But, one of the things we were talking about at our board meeting at the Film Society yesterday is we have a lot of work to do with diversity and inclusion, work that we get to do and we want to do it, but we have to start by educating ourselves. And that's just something that we owe to each other, to learn about each other, right? And then pass that on. So I feel like I would like to talk to you for about 5 hours, but I'm going to wrap us up here. So, in the past, we have kind of gone out with a lightning round. But because Bret has already answered those questions, I wanted to we'll do one lightning round question, and then apropos of what I'm drinking, and then I have a thoughtful question. So Brian Benson, coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Dolores Huerta, coffee or tea?
Chocolate.
I love it. Petey Barma, coffee, tea, or chocolate?
Coffee.
And Bret Parker?
Well, all of the above, if I can have it. Since Dolores changed the rules, I'm going with it.
So my last question for you all is this: in a moment, as a filmmaker, a storyteller, however you want to couch this, in these moments, excuse me if I get a little teary, when you or your loved ones are losing hope, what is something to say, give, bring to the table? What is something you can tell them? Brian.
I mean, I'm finding a lot of hope in this situation. I feel like this moment now is very similar to when Trump got elected, how there was a big women's movement. And I think we ended up with a lot of women in politics because of that. And I feel like we're at the same moment. I will tell you right now, I think the person who I call when I feel hopeless is Dolores, because Dolores always has a very hopeful perspective on things. She looks forward, and she's always about hope and change. And I gotta say, I just had that conversation with her after after the big birthday screening with her, show with her, online show, when the riots were starting. And, it's very emotional. And she's like, look, it's, she said she feels in her bones that this is going to be real change. And, she's lived through a lot of stuff. So I trust that.
Petey, what about you?
Oh, I have ebbed and flowed during this 4 months. The last 4 years. I've had a lot of different emotions, but right now I agree with Brian. I feel really hopeful, and I'm glad I'm here right now to be able to witness this and be a part of it and participate in it, and be on and hopefully the right side of history as we go forward. But within our house, I think I could echo the hearing and seeing better. So I am hopeful. I'm hopeful what I see around me. And I know sometimes being here in San Francisco and in the Castro, you can forget, or, that the world outside here is not is always feeling the same. But I'm originally from Central Florida, and we're going back there in a couple weeks. All things willing, and so I don't know. Hopeful that people I never thought would have a voice all of a sudden. So just look outside ourselves. It's there.
And Bret?
I would say also just to stay active. To be involved, and to not only be excited that the change is happening, but to internalize the change and what is the change within that we can participate in to help continue to create change and move the world forward.
And finally, Dolores, what do you have to say about hope?
Well, I think what we're seeing in front of us right now definitely makes us hopeful. And, as a union organizer back in the day, you knew that when things are really bad, then that's when changes happen. And I think this is what's happened now, where people are just so fed up with these police slayings and police abuse. And I know it's affected the Black community, but it's not just the Black community, it's the brown community, it's the LGBT community that have suffered abuses from the police and suffered discrimination. And I think people are said, hey, we're tired of this, and we want it to end. So I am extremely hopeful. I compare to the 60s when young white kids were marching against the Vietnam War, but they were marching against the war because they didn't want to go to war. But now you see all of these young kids that are marching out there, and they're marching for Black Lives Matter. They're marching against racial discrimination, and even taking down the Confederate statutes. And I don't know if you've heard, but in Sacramento, they're going to even take out the statue of Christopher Columbus. So that is a sensitive issue with all of the people from Latin America. So I am extremely hopeful. I never thought I would get to see this, and I think it started with the women's movement, and now it's we're into this new movement that we're seeing right now. And then the decisions that just came down from the Supreme Court, I think they're feeling the wave of righteousness also. So riding a wave of righteousness right now, we just have to make sure that we can institutionalize and put these things into statutes and laws so that people can be held accountable. So that's the next step. And definitely, I think a lot of people are energized by what's happening right now. And I think we're going to see some changes. And the nice thing is that we're alive to see them and participate in them.
Amen. That's so true. Thank you.
And register to vote.
Yeah.
Vote.
Vote. Thank you all for joining us today. You have just filled my cup in a way that I couldn't possibly express. So Thank you for all the good soul energy and for the storytelling and for coming together on a Sunday afternoon and just spending some time together. Bless up. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the day and take good care. And hopefully we'll see you back here for a third or fourth time, Bret.
Yeah. We'll just make
Thank you
it
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Catherine.
much.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Oops. I didn't mean to do that. I just meant to say goodbye to everybody. But thank you so much for joining us on this incredible Sunday. Happy Father's Day once again to all the dads out there and to our incredible guests who came today and shared their experience, strength, and hope with us. We couldn't have asked for better. So stay safe out there, stay connected, and if you have some extra time, we're going to keep those films available to you until tomorrow morning. So be sure and take a look. And until next time, we'll see you soon. Bye.